Got it.
Okay, I'll just make a quick announcement. So for the recording, so thank you everyone for joining tonight. Lama Adam, thank you for being here with us. It means a lot. And your cat, that's so beautiful. Um, so thank you for, yeah, thanks everyone for being here, and we will begin. Everybody put your microphones on mute. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Let's say the prayer of refuge before we begin. Sangye chedang soki chodama janchu padu dagni kyapsuchi dagi jinsogi pe sunam ki drola pinchi sangye drupasho sangye chedang soki chodama janchu padu dagni kyapsuchi dagi jinsogi pe sunamki jola penchi sangye drupasho sangye jidan soki chodama janchu padu dagni kyapsuchi Dagi jinsoki be sunamki drola penchi sangye drupasho. Alden sawe lama rinpoche dagi jiwa pede de jula. Kadren jembo gone je zunde kusum togi nge drup sadhu so. Okay, I was telling Max, I've had whatever this endless sicknesses that people have now. Like I've had a cold for like, I got it 3 days after the last time I taught for you guys, and I've had it since then. It's still like dragging on. So I don't know if it's like a lack of immunity from masking for 2 years or some new bug or something. It's not COVID. I've tested a million times, but so I just hope everyone stays healthy and all that kind of stuff. So we were doing kind of a series on balancing practice and study, and I was thinking tonight we could talk about, as much for my benefit as yours, we could talk about like how we study our own practice and like the ways, like little discoveries we've had about our practice, you know, and on the one hand, like how we can do better or how we see it impacting our life, or ways that we can make sure that it's meaningful in our lives. Um, and I can lead with some examples of my own, but I really would like to have just kind of, we got a nice small group of people who've practiced for a while. So it'd be nice to just kind of talk about that kind of stuff, you know. Um, in particular, I'm thinking about like for me, one of the things that I always come back to is I'm in this cycle. It's kind of like a cycle of mindfulness and mindlessness, but I'll go through times where I kind of forget when I'm doing like a deity practice that it's vitally important that we feel the the presence of whatever deity we're visualizing. And that came up a lot in the 3-year retreat. Whenever we would learn a new practice, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche would always say, the clarity of your visualization is not as important as your confidence in the presence of the deity. And that instruction is so impactful for a number of reasons. But for me, I think it's because, I mean, when you're sitting alone in a room, like doing something, it's very different than when you think Chen Razik is sitting right in front of you, you know? Uh,
Mm.
when you have that sense of like interaction and accountability going on, and even like that even sounds a little bit too much like pressure, even like having the cheering section there, you know, like having an encouraging, supportive, enlightened being that wants you to succeed, right there working with you, on discovering your Buddha nature. That's an incredibly, it just adds a lot. It supercharges practice when you can really kind of get that feeling. And that's sort of the looking upward view, like to the enlightened beings. And I'm, that's thinking of the one being as being present is kind of the focal aspect of it. But there's this broader aspect of the fact that whatever being we're visualizing, whether it's Chenrezig or Green Tara, or maybe the refuge tree if we're doing Nundro, whatever deity it is the embodiment of all enlightened beings. That's always part of these practices. So it's not even just one, like specific enlightened being or one specific aspect of enlightened mind. There's all of that is represented in whatever particular practice we're doing, whatever particular bodhisattva we're practicing. So that's the looking upward aspect, in the sense that like that's what we aspire to. But then there's also this aspect in a lot of these practices like Chenrezig, where we're leading all beings in going for refuge or in saying the mantra. So there's an aspect of feeling the presence of the enlightened beings, but there's also an aspect of kind of having everyone else around us and bringing them with us into our practice. And this one I've remembered a lot lately, because I'm still doing the prayer that saved Sakya that was suggested when the pandemic started. And in the text, it says when you do the refuge prayer that you're leading all beings in refuge. And I catch myself a lot. I'll be 2 or 3 repetitions in and I go, wait a minute, I'm just doing this by myself. Like I have to kind of remember and imagine all beings doing it with me. And it brings so much more meaning into the practice. So I guess I'll use that to kind of perhaps open a little dialogue of maybe ways that we've noticed our minds wandering, or ways that we've been able to kind of tune in on our practice after maybe a lull, things like that. Anybody have any comments in particular?
I have a comment.
Yeah.
So like when I think like lately I've been doing this. So when I think like bad thoughts about somebody who's doing something bad, but it's still bad thoughts, then I'm like, oh, stop it. And then I'll be like, oh, Mani Padme Hum. And then I'll just repeat that over and over again to get my mind to stop that. Yeah, because I don't want to go there.
Yeah. And that's actually, mantra actually means mind protection.
Oh, okay.
Like that's I don't know what, Charles, you may know more about that than me. What were you going to say?
Oh no, I was just itching.
Oh, okay. But yeah, mantra, I can't remember, like there's a breakdown in the syllables, but I'm not a Sanskrit scholar, but ma and tra like add up to like mind protection. So that's one way of thinking about saying a mantra, is it's a thing that protects your mind from all these other places it can go that may not be as helpful and could actually be detrimental. So that's a great use of mantra. That's the great way to do it,
Yeah, I just started doing it. It really helps.
Yeah, that's really good. Another good thing, I would just suggest another really helpful, trying to think of the right word for it, because that's when we go into those kinds of thoughts, it's some sort of fixation on conceptuality and a reinforcement of a sense of self and other, and wanting to protect self. And I think if always a good way to reframe that is the 3 seeds from Lojong, which is the idea, like 3 objects, 3 poisons, 3 seeds of virtue. We call it 3 seeds for short. But the idea is that we meet with 3 kinds of objects. We meet with things that are pleasurable or unpleasurable or neutral. And in response to those kinds of things, we generate usually 3 poisons. So if it's something pleasurable, we get attached to it. If it's something unpleasant, we push it away, aversion. And if it's something neutral, we just ignore it. We're not engaged. We're no longer generating awareness. And that's what we normally do in response to the objects, is the poisons. But we can, instead of the poisons, engage in 3 seeds of virtue, which would mean turning in really a cool, subversive kind of way, turning those feelings into positive aspiration. So the aspiration itself, I have it on the back of my business card. I kind of wish I had it here because I'll probably forget it when I try. But it is, in short, so like if it's like anger we're feeling with someone, we would say like, may this anger contain the anger of all sentient beings. By my working through this moment of anger, may I and all beings attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. And it's a great way to not, I mean, mantra is an awesome way to do it, but there's some value, I think, in also staying present with whatever's going on, because there's something important there. There's actually something really useful there in those moments of attachment or aversion or ignorance. There's something that's actually our own specific path to awakening that's really potent in that moment. And that kind of an aspiration, like that 3 seeds aspiration, is a beautiful way of doing it, because we take, for instance, anger, and we stay with it. We say like, I'm not only going to feel this anger, I'm going to bring anger of all beings in, and I'm going to like take it and enclose it in my anger, you know. And we also acknowledge by saying like, by my working through this moment of anger, we also remind ourselves of something we often forget, which is that those feelings are impermanent. You know, it's not gonna be like that always. We're just angry right now, and so we're going to be with this moment of anger. And in doing so, like, we're going to work towards awakening where no one has to be angry. And we remind ourselves what the ultimate goal is, you know, the absence of anger or attachment or jealousy or whatever. So mantra is a great way to do it. I would also say, I think I usually try to turn to the 3 seeds too.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Lama
Yeah.
Adam, you
Uh-huh.
said something about what Khenpo Karthar said about visualization, and I really
Mhm.
want to hear it one more time because it was pretty profound. And then I have something to say about visualization.
Yeah. Yeah. He said, let me see if I can remember word it the best way. More important than the clarity of your visualization is that you have the confidence in the presence of the deity.
I'm just writing that down.
I literally wrote that on my text for the mantra section in every practice in retreat, because that's the thing that I forget every month or two and have to kind of remind myself of.
Because I once read, when I first started to practice many years ago, I always had a really hard time with visualization, and I would get hung up on it a lot. And then I'm getting better and better at it now, though. But I read something by Tenzin Palma, I think it was, from her book,
Yeah.
one of her books, and she was saying that she said something like, in Tibet, there's such vast space everywhere that the visualizations come easier when you're practicing out there. The Tibetans find it a
Huh.
lot easier to visualize because of that vast space. I mean, she put it in a really beautiful way. And here, where everything's very much like frenetic, chaotic, and all over the place, we don't have that space, that vastness. So when we're trying to visualize, we get caught up in other thoughts, like almost like having monkey mind when you're trying to meditate a little bit. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think I could see that because I mean, I'm right in downtown Columbus now, and I know you guys are in LA, and it's like, everywhere you look, there's something, and there's something new, and there's something different, and there's signs that they're telling you things, and there's trash, and there's flowers, and I mean, it's just like, there's so much to be seen. I think we're in a habit of like, you know, filling in space with like new visual information all the time. So I could definitely see that. And I know, I think I mentioned this summer when I was staying up in Cleveland and I was near the lake and I was able to watch sunsets over the ocean. That's something else, or over the lake, which you guys get to watch over the ocean. Like that unbroken horizon is just such a rare and blessed experience. I think it's really cool that we get those opportunities. And I think there is probably a little advantage of getting some practice with that sort of spaciousness. And just in case it's something that folks haven't heard before, I've definitely heard multiple teachers mention how our visualizations will never look like what we see, like because it's not a, you know, it's not an eye faculty that's making the visualization. It's a mental faculty. So it is like a different experience to have a clear visualization in a deity practice. But at the same time, you know, stability figures into it a lot too, which is, I think, probably at least part of what Tenzin Palmo was talking about, because we do get, you know, like you were saying, like monkey mind, like it's tough to stay with a visualization to even try to get it clear because our mind's jumping around. Yeah.
I wanted to ask something as well about the visualization and the sort of feeling the presence of the deity. I'm probably overcomplicating things, but I find it equally difficult, is maybe not, or tricky, both of those things, because I think sometimes, for example, in some places you visualize your teacher, your guru, or His Holiness Karmapa, and I feel then, similar to like what you said last time with the visualization, when you know, instead of imagining the deity or whatever as a solid sort of form, that you imagine it as a being made of light, I also catch myself thinking like, am I thinking of, for example, the Karmapa in his ordinary form, or teacher, or Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche or somebody, am I thinking of him, am I feeling the feeling of him being there in his ordinary form? So I think I find that also quite tricky to find, like, because it isn't, both of the things happen in your imagination, so to speak. That's the tool we use right now, because I'm obviously not at a level, I don't know, where you actually feel it. So it's still like a process of pretending. Is that the right word to say? That's what
It's a useful word.
It's a useful word, but that's how you started, right? You sort of like, you say like, okay, I feel it there. And then, I mean, there is a thing, like basically what I'm saying is like, I'm not sure if I'm doing it right with anything anyways. That's a given for me. But
Yeah.
but I do feel it sometimes, like the presence of it, but I never know if it's the right feeling, so to speak, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah. And there was a great Lama Mitchell and I are recording a series right now where we're doing like a book study on Trungpa Rinpoche's Crazy Wisdom. We're kind of going chapter by chapter and talking about each one. And we did a great chapter today where he was talking about like, I think he was answering somebody's question about like, how do I know what enlightenment is, or what do I know what Buddhahood is? And I think he basically said like, maybe that feeling of wondering what it is Buddhahood. You know, like there's maybe that is like the path, is like having that sort of desire, but not knowing exactly what it is or being able to put a finger on it. So that's one way to think of it. But you also brought up something that I actually asked Lama Lojo recently in an interview, because I asked her about visualizing Khenpo Rinpoche as Khenpo Rinpoche. Like, is that a problem? Like, do I have to? I mean, I visualize Vajradhara, but like, I also think of Rinpoche because that's how I knew him, you know? And she said she didn't think it was a problem to visualize these beings in their human form, as long as we recognize that they're not, you know, strictly a human form. So as long as there's some awareness that you know, we're seeing them manifest in this way, and we don't think of them as being like permanent or solid or mundane in that regard. So her instruction was like, it's actually okay to visualize in that way, which is kind of nice to hear, because that is what I'm drawn to as well a lot of times.
But then it is already that anyways, isn't it? Sorry, Charles. You know what I mean? By the simple fact that you visualizing it, it already isn't a real thing, so to speak. And you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Even though
yeah.
the form might appear ordinary, but it isn't an ordinary. It isn't. It's a visualized ordinary form. So.
And I think that's probably part of the skillful means of it, because really everything we experience is a mental form anyway.
Yeah.
And so we're kind of just working with that same idea. And I think that is part of what this same chapter that, I think you used the word pretend earlier. The same chapter of Crazy Wisdom we were working on talks about that too. The idea of like needing some kind of trickery to trick us into recognizing our actual state, our Buddha nature, like recognizing that it is like that we're there already, really, and so there is an amount of we call it skillful means, but he acknowledged these aren't the best words for it in the book, but he said trickery and pretend, and he used words like that because. And actually, I think the most meaningful thing to me was he said, like, when you get tricked, it's like right away and it's immediate and you don't know what's happening. Like if somebody tricks you, it's over before you know what happened. And in that sense, that's kind of what needs to happen with us, because we have this gravity and this comfort level in our habits. And we have this comfort level in our confusion. And we really made a home in there. And so we need something to, like trick us out of that. And so I think a lot of times, like these types of practices and the things you're asking about and that we grapple with in these practices, questions like that, I think they're actually part of the trick, like part of what gets us there, and so I hope this doesn't feel like a cop-out answer, but
No, I think it makes sense. Because you're saying basically it is part of the process anyways, this sort of going backwards and forwards and saying like, is this something real? Am I visualizing this correctly or not? But at the same time, it all comes from the same place, really. The wrong visualization and the correct visualization is the same thing, really. It's not a difference, I suppose, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely better ways to do it than others, but that process of kind of tuning in and connecting. I mean, ultimately, we're connecting with ourselves and we're connecting with our own nature and really ideally realizing non-duality and shunyata. But to take it to the Vajrayana level, which is the practices we're talking about here, it's not just like that non-duality. It's like the goodness in that non-duality, the kind of positive and energetic aspect of that's beyond just a voidness, So I think that energetic aspect, I think a lot of times manifests as what seems to us like an uncertainty or ungroundedness or need to tweak and adjust and things like that. Charles, what were you thinking?
Well, I jumped up when you said it's kind of what we're drawn to. There was a comment you made to that effect, and for many years I was drawn. I always said I was going to meditate later in the day, then I never got around to it. But I was drawn to getting up and making offerings to the shrine. And that continues to this day. Now, I have no doubt about being able to practice later in the day or through the day. That's gone. That worry about not doing practice is finished. But the point about the shrine, and I've told a lot of friends this, that if they can't even sit or practice for a while, to put yourself in front of that shrine, because as soon as we make offerings to it, now there's some days I'll catch myself and I'll give water for drinking, water for washing, flowers, incense, and then I'll realize I'm just going through the motions here. The deities, the Buddha Khenpo Rinpoche, the Karmapa, all the enlightened Sangha, Tara, Thousand Arm Chenrezig, Mahakala, they're all here. And all of a sudden, I just feel like such joy, realizing that these are beings that are there for me and with me. So, and a lot of times I feel too that that's a moment of rebirth right there. If we can, if we're suddenly in a vacuum or void, and then all of a sudden we have the enlightened beings, I imagine that transition to being in with them is a fairly easy one, and one that's more accommodated throughout the day the more we think about these things. And that so I do try to always catch myself if I'm not thinking that I'm in the presence of the Buddhas when I'm making the offerings. No, and sometimes probably I've gone through making my offerings mindlessly and not had that connection. But what Khenpo Rinpoche refers to is it's that feeling of presence that is so important. And the joy of having a beautiful shrine is that we don't need to imagine what these beings look like. We can look right at them. We're there with them. So your comment about what draws you, I think that has drawn me into different types of practices. The mindfulness, I find harder to practice with the feeling that the Buddhas and everyone's with me, but the more and more all these practices continue, the more it's quite evident that they are with us at every moment throughout the day. So I'm glad you brought up this as a subject. I thought when I first read it, finding the balance between practice and study, I thought usually you hear what's the balance between practice and daily life.
Mm-hmm.
And the point is, of course, to turn daily life into practice. But when you said balance between practice and study, were you drawing a distinction between practice and study?
Well, we've actually done, this is kind of the third. The first one I talked a lot about, I kind of did the case for practice, and used some quotes from Rinpoche and some other teachers. And then I talked about ways that I think are beneficial ways to study. The idea being that I'm a conceptual addict. I know that, like my name is Adam Berner and I'm a conceptual addict. Like, I know that. And so, how do I work with this gravitational pull towards wanting to think about stuff and figure stuff out and read about stuff and learn the practices and learn about this deity and learn this philosophy? And, it's a fixation. And so it was kind of a case for practice and some ideas about like different stages in our practice, what's maybe the right stuff to read for what we're doing. And then last time we had a discussion about the 3 stages of practice: listening, contemplating, and meditating. So like I talked about some stuff, and then we discussed, and then we meditated. And this time I'm taking this different approach where I figured, like, how do we study our practice? Because really, I do think that's the practice aspect that's the most important, but it's always going to be this conceptual pull. There's always going to be this kind of desire to get into the details and the experiential aspect of it, rather, maybe that's not the right word, into the like temporal aspect of it. What have I learned today? Or how is today compared to yesterday? When in a way we're also looking for this sudden enlightenment, this moment of just kind of waking up. So that's kind of where I thought about tonight, was how do we study our practice? Because if we're going to study something, like let's study the time we're spending practicing,
Interesting point.
And then oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to add something also. I'm in part 4 of Nundro, and I've been looking back, reflecting on my practice and how much of it I was caught up in the math, like the mathematics of Nundro. How many prostrations am I doing today? How many did I do yesterday? Oh gosh, I'm going to be doing this for 8 more months, or whatever the case is.
Yeah.
But what I've started to realize is more like the heart mind physics of Nundro, which is the quality of the visualizations and our relationships in the different stages. Like in the first part of Nundro, yeah, I can just count prostrations all day. But if I'm not remembering that my mother and all beings are gathered at the shore of this lake with a giant refuge tree, then I'm really missing out on a lot. And when I've learned to slow down and to really feel into the practice, then it's just completely different. And that to me is like the treasure of Tibetan Buddhism is, yeah, we have some goals and achievements in mind, which are, like maybe rest areas along the highway. But my gosh, we got to roll the windows down and smell the flowers as we're going down the highway, and not just be caught up in getting to the gas station to try to fill up and have enough energy to do the practice the next day.
Yeah, that's great. That completely resonates with me. Like I feel like that's kind of one of there's so many good things about Nundro. I'm a huge fan of Nundro. I could not wait to start doing Nundro again when the 3-year retreat was ending. That was like what I was looking forward to, is starting Nundro again. And I think part of the reason is because of those vast numbers. Like you have to connect with this vastness that you really almost never deal with. Like it's really just the number that blows people away. You did how many prostrations? Like nobody does 111,111 of anything that they know of, or purposely. But like you're saying, when you get into it, you also learn that like one perfectly executed prostration where you're fully present, and perfectly offering yourself for the benefit of all beings could potentially be enough for full awakening. In one prostration, you can do it. And so that's like the beautiful unity of these practices with these big numbers, is like you meet with these huge numbers, but you can do it in one, and you have to make those two things kind of come together. And I think it's beautiful. It sounds like you feel that too.
The vastness of some of the visualizations too. My mother and all sentient beings are doing prostrations on the grassy shores of the lake.
Yeah.
And Vajrasattva, the Karmapa has Vajrasattva in this totally brilliant, milky white, golden image sphere above our heads, and on and on and on.
Yeah. We're a great commercial for Nundro. If anyone hasn't tried. I wanted to jump back to...
I don't want to do any other practices. Your comment the other day, I don't want to say I don't want to do others, but I don't know what I'd do without Nundro, and I don't care how many more. I'm doing prostrations every day and Vajrasattva every day. And then if I have to, I'll add mandala practice, but I'm not giving up those two anyway. And I don't care how many mantras. The numbers just faded away a long time ago, because I knew, that if I did a certain minimum every day, that certain quantities would eventually be attained the older I
Yeah.
got. But I want to thank Daniel because for the last 2 or 3 times, he mentioned being in a line at the shopping center, and the customer service clerk that was working with him, he mentioned this infinite compassion that arose within him towards this person, and he talked about that happening before. It wasn't just a one-timer. And I love these discussions because that helped remind me to slow down when I'm in the grocery line and really be present with that person that's serving me, particularly at the deli, because they're in such a hurry and there's such a line of people all pushing to get the food. And these people are trying the best they can. And it's just, I don't know. I wanted to thank you, Daniel, for calling attention to those folks because it's helped me slow down a bit and send them good wishes. And Lisa and I tend to interact about current events and particularly the upcoming trial that's going to occur. I mean, it's inevitable. There's going to be a multitude of charges. And so I'd like to suggest, given what you said before about your reaction to like when you get down on somebody to try and repeat Omani Peme Hong or something. But more and more, I realize I'm waiting to watch karma. I'm waiting for the effects of karma to play out. I know that it's going to, in the form of a trial. This is going to be karma playing out right in front of us. So, but rather than toss anger at the people who have brought this upon themselves, to somehow, to shower them with goodwill, just, I don't know. I don't know if I can relate to that, but at least trying to remain neutral and not angry at them for the ignorance that they exhibited that caused all this turmoil in our country. So somehow, when I do Nundro, the prostration part, I put them right in front of the refuge tree. Is that the instruction? Don't they say?
Yeah, people you have problems with in front of you.
Yeah. I do put them up there. I'm not particularly leading them in the prostrations, but they're in front of the refuge tree. I'm kind of hands off as to wanting them to do prostrations. I don't think we're supposed to be visualizing them doing prostrations, are we, or do we?
We're all doing prostrations together.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, they can be up front doing prostrations too.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just say at their own pace.
Mm-hmm.
That's a joke.
So everyone, the whole world is doing prostate, or the entire whatever, everything. Yeah. That's kind of cool.
Particularly the negative beings that have just wreaked havoc on our planet and on our country.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I do wish them well. I mean, it's just
can
like,
you imagine them?
but the karma, there's something very exciting to me waiting for these trials to begin because they have warranted this. I'm sorry, but cause and effect, right? Or no? Am I
Well,
not?
Don't say these
I
things.
don't think you're. Go ahead, Max.
I just wanted to say, I have a feeling we might be disappointed. So I'm just preparing myself for, because it happened so many times. And
Well,
every
yeah,
time nothing happened, basically. So I don't know.
Okay.
I wish
Well,
it happened.
but it's inevitable in time. In time, that full swing of karma will come back. We might not see it
Yeah, we might not see
I'm
it.
not
Yeah.
necessarily saying I'm going to see it, but
Mm.
I'm already seeing it.
Yeah.
It's never,
I doubt they're
it's
happy. I doubt they're happy people. They, you know
no,
what I
no, and
mean?
that's a cause. That's what we had a conversation about that the other day, that it's a cause for compassion on our part, because when we imagine the suffering that they're going through, to imagine all these conspiracies and all this criminal activity and participating in it and contributing to it, man, that's so much suffering. I mean, there are times when I actually feel sorry and true compassion, and that's probably a better space to be at. But most of the time, I'll just take a neutral position, and I'm trying to take neutral and put them in front of the refuge tree.
And I
And
think that
I
actually
hope
gets
that,
at our point tonight, though, which is kind of like the practice we need to study is our own. And that's really the only practice we can understand and know. And I hear, like, I understand, and I think I have some of that feeling too, you know. But I think where I go in terms of karma is I try to err on the side of the fact that the Buddha said that only enlightened beings can understand, the actual inner workings of it, and for anyone else it would cause madness and vexation. And I know early on, I remember asking Lama Yeshe Jamso when he was teaching, I asked him, like, it was kind of a mind blower for me to recognize that most karma doesn't come to fruition in this life. Like, it's actually more often than not later lives that karma comes to fruition. So I feel, I kind of feel like with situations like we're talking about, and other situations where people have caused a lot of suffering and pain, like, we really don't know what led to that, and we don't know when, that even if there was a result that we would kind of hope to see, we don't know that it's actually directly caused by the things we think it was caused by, because we don't have the
that's a good
power
point.
to know, and in any case, I feel like it's always safer to examine my own situation. And if I'm seeing something, a quality that I find distasteful in someone else, I think that's kind of like an externalization of something I have in me. It may not be to the same scale. I may not have the kind of connections or karma propensities to impact as many people with my own selfishness or my own callousness. But I have that, I have those same seeds, those same five, ignorance, attachment, pride, jealousy, anger. I have all of those too, just like everybody else. And so I think the safest way is to keep the spotlight on my own, my own stuff, and then turn the compassion light out to everybody else. But that's tough.
Well
It's
said, monk.
hard. I wanted to jump back though, because what you said about the shrine, I think, was really cool, and I want to just mention that the shrine, like Rinpoche said, that if you can do nothing else, keep your shrine. So, like, if you're too busy or you don't have the time to sit for whatever reason, he said, at a bare minimum, open your shrine and close your shrine. And so I think there's something really important there. Like you talked about the offerings, like engaging in that practice of offering at the beginning of the day, starting with making offerings to the enlightened beings and recalling their presence, and connecting with them in that way is a great way to set an intention for your day, to begin the day, set out in that way on your day. And then I think part of the reason why we close the shrine is to bookend that. And so I often think about how there's several ways of talking about how we strengthen a karma, strengthen a habit. If we think of it in terms of like intention, beginning an action, completing an action, and like reviewing the action. The traditional thing is rejoicing, but you could either rejoice or regret but so I like review, so if the beginning of the day we set an intention, to practice for the benefit of all beings, we practice generosity. That's like our intention. Then we set off on the day, hoping in as many moments as possible, at least more moments than not, to be mindful and be awake and be generous. Then at the end of the day, when we return to our shrine and we take those offerings down, that's another moment to recall the presence of those enlightened beings, and in particular to review, take some time to rejoice in the good things we did, in the moments of mindfulness, and the moments of generosity, the moments of engaging rather than turning off, like actually rejoicing in those. Because if we do that, then we've actually made that a much stronger habit. We've influenced that karma. We've made it much stronger. It's more likely to reoccur. But if we did stuff that we regret, we resolve not to repeat it. So I think regret's really important in Buddhism, but it always has to come with resolution. So like we regret things we did, things we said, or things we didn't do, things that were not beneficial. And we recognize them. We generate some regret and we confess them in front of those enlightened beings who, again, are present. Like we're not just saying it, like we're saying, Buddha, I'm so sorry I did these things. Like not because he's mad at us, but because we recognize they're causing us to suffer. They're causing other people to suffer. And then in front of the Buddha, we resolve not to repeat those things. And so I like thinking of a day in that way, of like one kind of shot over a day to influence our karma in the most possible ways: intention, beginning, completing, and then reviewing. So I think the shrine is a perfect example of how we make that happen, because it's beginning of the day, end of the day, and then what do we do in between? Do we keep it up? How much of the time are we keeping it up? Because moment to moment, we're either awake or asleep. And I think that's a neat idea when we think of like sudden enlightenment. Doesn't just like happen and then you're there. It's like it happens instant to instant. There are moments where we're fully awake, but then we just a lot of times go right back to sleep. So how often are we actually like staying awake? But yeah, so I wanted to touch back on that just because I really appreciated you bringing up about the shrine, because that's just a great way to think about all of our practice and the perfect beginning and ending of all of that.
Is it good practice to take everything down? I mean, I leave it up, but I should be taking it and putting it away as a way of closure, and I don't know, as
The offerings
as
he's
a way
talking
of
about. Taking the offerings away. Taking the
Yeah.
offerings that you've made.
Yeah, like the Buddha itself. Do I take it? I'll put it
Oh, no,
away,
no.
or do I? No. Oh, got
Offerings.
it. Okay. Offerings. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the
Okay,
cool
yeah,
thing
yeah.
about that is you can it's blessed at that point. So like I love taking the water out, dumping it on a bush, thinking about the little animals and the microbes that are then like blessed by that water. When I lived in an apartment, I would dump it down the sink because that's all that I had to, but I would think about all the people it was passing on the way down, and then like taking out, like if you have food, either taking out the food for animals, if it's something safe, or eating it yourself, or sharing it with people. I like sometimes like if I offer like like mini snacks, like mini candy bars and stuff, keeping those around and then giving them to people when they come over, and I don't even have to tell them, but I know like they're eating blessed food.
Aw, yeah.
Yeah. Or take them to work and share them,
Yeah, that's a good idea. I like that.
Yeah.
Now, do you take, I've heard that you're supposed to take candy bars and things out of the wrappers. Do you take,
Huh.
have
That
you
sounds
never
to
heard
me
that?
that I haven't, but that sounds to me like something that I could hear a teacher saying situationally.
Uh-huh.
Like it's probably something there. I'm sure that how it is, like a teacher probably had a reason to say that at some point, but it's not something I've heard before. But yeah, Daniel.
Oh, I paraphrased a prayer from Khenpo Karthar when he was asked what to do about when we see people causing harm in the world, what do we do?
That's beautiful.
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you.
But there is so much to think about with the offerings. There was a little bit of a kerfuffle in my retreat because, and granted, I had my own fixation in this situation, but it occurred to me that dogs can't eat chocolate. It makes them sick, right?
Mhm.
And so I was thinking about the fact that we were dumping large amounts of chocolate outside for the chipmunks and the squirrels. And I thought, well, their digestive system can't be more complex than a dog, you know, and I actually had our cook do some research. And, you know, there's not a lot of major corporations funding research into chocolate in squirrels like there are dogs, you know, so there wasn't a lot of information or anything accurate. But I mean, I think it was a fair assumption. I think it's probably a fair assumption that chocolate's not good for simple mammals, you know. But people were really upset that I was like making trouble, you know, like wanting to not have chocolate in the offerings, you know. We did, I think, eventually stop putting chocolate in the offerings, but that's not something that I think is mandated. And I think it's maybe something that many places haven't even thought of. But I share the story just to point out that there's just like so many ways of doing this stuff. And when you start to try to unravel all the ways that we might be hurting beings, you're always going to find more. And that's the unfortunateness of our situation. We can try to be as mindful as we can about protecting beings, but we just don't have the karma to live a life where we never hurt anyone. Not yet, anyway.
Nuts would be good.
Yeah, perfect. They love
Squirrels love
those.
nuts. Yeah.
Yeah,
You probably did the
chipmunks
right
too.
thing.
Yeah, chipmunks too.
Yeah, I think it's probably safe.
No, it was a good thing to stop the chocolate to the,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and see, you stood up for the right thing and you took some grief for it, but you did the right thing. So very
Yeah,
good.
I hope so. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's just, you know, I think there's a lot of that, and that's, you know, luckily that's the way Buddhism, I think, has developed for thousands of years now, is like we're open. Like I think isn't it the Dalai Lama said at one point, like if science says something in Buddhism is wrong, Buddhism will change. You know, like we're progressing on the path with our eyes open, and as we learn new things, we adjust. You know,
I never heard
and
that. Good.
I've heard that. I hope it's not one of those things where like you see on Facebook where it says like don't trust everything you read on the internet and it's attributed to Abe Lincoln, you know. I should say that because I don't know exactly where that came from, but it seems like it seems pretty accurate to me.
That reminds me of something I'd ask people's advice on, because they put up at my work, they're very diversity conscious, and we've been putting up diversity posters and quotes from famous individuals. And so the dean of the college bought probably a set because they all match each other graphically. But they have a picture of the Buddha, and the Buddha's quote is, "If you do something, do it with all your heart." And I thought, you know, I never heard that. I never heard the Buddha say that. And I'm not quite sure what that means, because if a thief is concentrated on opening that safe, he's doing it with all of his heart. So that's not a good quote for the Buddha. And I'm thinking about asking if I can take that poster down and just, you know, like slip another, even it doesn't, we don't have to have a quote from the Buddha. If you can't get a good quote from that set,
Yeah,
just don't do it. But does somebody
I
have
bet
an
you can find someone
interpretation
else.
of if you can't do something, oh no, if you do something, do it with all your heart?
Maybe they
Is that
mean
a-
with your loving heart, like do it with
Yeah,
do it
loving
with
kindness.
compassion.
Your heart is with love.
Yeah,
but
or compassion maybe. But then they should
yeah,
use that word, right?
Yeah, it just,
Yeah, instead of heart.
yeah.
It was probably from a Hallmark card.
Oh
Well,
yeah,
I'm
right.
sure it was. That's kind of the
Yeah.
way those quotes on the board are. I'm sure
Yeah.
Albert Einstein's not very pleased with the one they attributed.
Did they do it in quote? They-
Oh, I want to mention, Charles, I don't know if you had the opportunity to see this, but I have a part-time position at Denison now, and I'm director of Buddhist and Contemplative Life at Denison, which is cool. It's a job they like created for me. It's just about 10 hours a week, and so I'm getting to do some really neat stuff and meet with students and teach them to meditate. And we've set up a meditation room, and I'm getting a proper shrine set up. And but I know the 60 Karmapa went there because they have a pretty extensive collection of Burmese Buddhas.
Yes.
Were you ever able to see those?
Yes, I was with the Karmapa when we went in there to that. And
Beautiful.
I think it's the most extensive collection of Burmese Buddhas possibly in the United States, other than maybe the Asian Art Museum in San Francisco. But when I will share a story you'll love, because they had the professor or the archivist or whoever was guarding was sitting in there, and the Karmapa came in with all the monks, and he immediately started doing prostrations, and they weren't expecting that.
Uh-huh.
But I always had it. I lived, just for everybody else's interest, I lived about 10 miles from there, and tried to get involved in exactly what you're doing. And I'm so thrilled to hear that you've set this up. And as I look around now at so many universities, there are mindfulness training programs. And so this is magnificent. But, if I don't know if you can they've got magnificent Buddhas in that collection.
Well, I was
would be-
there. I was
Yeah.
there Monday. So we set up an appointment to go, and my plan was to liberate the Buddhas, really. But I went because most of them are just in storage. They have 3 of them
Yes.
out, but like they took me in the back room where they keep
Right.
them all. And
Yeah.
I mean, there are shelves and shelves and shelves of
Yes.
breathtaking Buddhas, all different
Yes.
styles, all different positions. And so we talked to them about some ways we can collaborate with them. And my main point was, can we have a discussion now that we have a shrine and a meditation room? Can we like move 1 or 2 of you? Can you loan us some of these so they can actually serve their purpose? So they can actually be there for people to use for what they're for. And they're open to the conversation. I mean, we have to kind of figure out the mechanics of it, how that would work and all that stuff, but we're going to have another conversation. So, and my boss, the chaplain, is very supportive of the idea too.
I don't want to put the cart in front of the horse, but that collection could tour the United States rather than sit in a storage room when it's not out. Every few years they pull it out, and they do a beautiful job with the exhibit. But there, of course, you'd have to have funding, but those pieces, the sum total, are worthy of a national exhibit. And there are so many foundations, the Smithsonian, et cetera, the government grants are available in the hundreds of thousands of dollars that could pack those up and send them and have them develop. But first, what you need, I think, to do is because you've described already so many varieties. This one is sitting in the earth touching mudra. And in this mudra, the Buddha called all the devas to witness his effort put in for many lifetimes. And then you'll have to develop exhibit for each piece to tell about the uniqueness of it. But you've got infinite. I'm so thrilled to hear this, because the sky's the limit, what you can do.
Yeah, I knew you'd be
Good luck.
excited. I thought you might have been there because I know the 60 Karmapa did a lot of stuff out in that area. So
Yeah.
I thought
Yeah.
you might
It
have.
was the same day he did the Arboretum.
Oh, cool.
He went from there to.
So I see the
well,
quote here. We've got it was Jesus and not Buddha.
What?
It's a Bible.
To do it with your heart.
Yes, it's a Bible quote.
It's a Bible quote, and they've given it to Buddha. I don't know. I'm in enough trouble with the dean already, so I'm probably going to keep my mouth shut.
Wow. Well, any other thoughts? I'm really glad. I'm so glad we had this dialogue. This was a lot of fun.
It helps, yeah.
Thank you, my friends.
It's good to hear everybody's progress and how I can really relate to everyone. It's like we're in the same, like, oh, I feel that too. It helps.
Yeah, these are the best kind of conversations, I think, where we can all see that, whatever struggles we have and we're all kind of in it together. I love those kind of things. So I guess I would just say thank you for having me once again. It's always wonderful to see you all, and I hope that I've said everything accurately tonight, and if I didn't, I confess any errors. And I rejoice in all the teachings and all of our teachers, and I pray that they stay around for a long time and keep turning the wheel of Dharma. And with that said, let's dedicate the merit of our time here tonight for the benefit of all sentient beings.
Lama Adam, just one other thing. When you sign off, Max can stay on for a few extra minutes and tell us about his trip to KTD and Karma Ling, but you're free to go.
Oh, yeah. I'll hang out for that too, but we'll dedicate the merit.
Okay.
By this merit, may we obtain the omniscience of Buddhahood, and may it defeat our common enemy, wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may we free all beings.